Okay, my name is John Herbst. I run the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. Thank you all for joining us here at the Atlantic Council's Global Futures Forum. I am delighted to to welcome one of the world's strongest voices for democracy, Ms. Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, the national leader of Belarus. Sviatlana has been tenaciously leading the fight for freedom and human rights in Belarus since she was the rightful victor of the fraudulent August 2020 presidential election that unfortunately saw the continued control of Belarus by the dictator Alexander Lukashenko. I first met Ms. Tsikhanouskaya 4 years ago approximately when she took her first visit to the United States after that election. She rose to global prominence upon entering the presidential race as a replacement for her husband, who had been arrested because he was the presumptive favorite in that election. She knew the great peril of taking on his mantle, and she took it on with grace, with courage, and with efficiency. After all, by the real vote, she won. But in Lukashenko's Belarus, the real vote doesn't matter or didn't matter. The Atlantic Council has offered strong support for a free and democratic Belarus, basically since Belarus emerged from the rubble of the Soviet Union. It's never been a democracy. And that support has only increased as a result of the election, which turned Ms. Tsikhanouskaya into a global figure. Lukashenko's dictatorial regime not only suppresses and brutalizes its people, but is also complicit in supporting Putin's war crime-filled war in Ukraine. That includes the forced kidnapping of children, the re-education and militarization of Ukrainians unfortunate enough to be under Kremlin control. Ms. Tsikhanouskaya has been an exemplar of resilience that is essential for democratic advocacy. When change is incremental and people continue to suffer, it is easy to lose hope. Today in Belarus, many democracy defenders are behind bars, some tortured, some incommunicado, like Ms. Tsikhanouskaya's husband, who has not been heard from in over 555 days. Independent media, one of the main targets of Lukashenko's regime, struggle to share the truth. Here, Sviatlana's leadership has been absolutely crucial. She's rallied her people, enabling this fight for freedom and democracy to continue in Belarus. The Atlantic Council is honored to host her again here in New York as part of our Global Futures Forum. She represents the very best of those fighting for freedom, open societies, and a just future for people around the world, but especially, of course, in her native Belarus. Ms. Tsikhanouskaya, we're delighted to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Herbst, for your kind words. I'm really honored to be introduced by such a great friend of Belarus. Dear friends, Your Excellencies, I know that I'm among friends today. People who not just believe in a better future, but take actions to make it happen. I'd like to thank our dear host, the Atlantic Council, for always standing with those who fight for freedom, and for your commitment to democratic Belarus. Ambassador Herbst, Shelby, I don't see you, and the whole team, thank you. In 2020, when our protests sparked, you were among the first who raised the alarm. This is where the world must watch. You promised to support our fight for freedom no matter how long it will take, and you kept your word. Because you understand that the fight for freedom is a global one. If there is one thing that we have learned in the last few years, it is that when freedom is under attack in one country, it's under threat everywhere. From Ukraine to Iran, from Venezuela to Cuba, the fight for freedom connects us all. You know, the fight for democracy is often romanticized. You may remember the inspiring pictures of mass protests in Belarus when hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets. We remember those fearless women with bunches of flowers leading the protests. However, there is a darker picture of this fight, because the road to freedom is paved with pain, tears, and suffering, and this is the reality. Fighting for freedom is about personal sacrifice, and we must always remember about all those who pay big price for the values we share so dearly. As we speak, thousands of Belarusians are behind bars. Every single day, dozens of people are being detained and tortured, just because they dared to speak the truth, just because they wanted Belarus free and democratic. Many political prisoners in my country are held incommunicado, with no connection with the outside world. For over 500 days, I didn't hear a single word about my husband. I even don't know if he is alive. He was sentenced to 19 years in prison just because he dared to challenge the dictator. Or take Maria Kolesnikova, who became a symbol of women resistance in 2020. She is literally dying in prison. She weighs 45 kilos now because of bad prison food. She can't recover after a very serious surgical operation. Or take Ales Bialiatsky, our Nobel Peace Prize laureate. The regime is torturing him by not providing essential medication. Just before being arrested, he called for national dialogue. He called on authorities to speak to the people. Arresting him was the regime's answer, because the dictators don't need dialogue, and the only language they know is a language of violence. For more than 4 years, the regime in Minsk hasn't stopped taking revenge on people. There is no family not affected by repressions. Many families have torn apart. Hundreds of thousands had forced to flee their homeland. You know, the regime thought that violence could silence people, but instead it sparked a fire that still burns today. And every day, Belarusians continue to resist. Some undergroundly, some in exile, still fighting for our freedom. We cannot be silenced, and our fight for freedom cannot be stopped. We realize that fight for freedom is not sprint, it's a marathon. They say if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And our fight needs allies. And many of these allies are in this room today. You know, as dictators are building alliances and learning from each other, we, democratic society, must stay united too. We must work together to safeguard and empower democracy. It means we must stand principled and firm against injustice wherever it appears. When one nation's freedom is trampled, it sends a signal to every tyrant: you can get away with it. It means we must punish all those who crush freedoms, no matter where it happens. We need sanctions to be tightened, not because sanctions are perfect, but because they are necessary. It means to protect our democratic institutions. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. Freedom is so easy to lose, and it's so hard to gain it back. It means to show solidarity and empathy with all those who suffer from cruel regimes. It means supporting civil society and human rights defenders. It also means to support independent media and journalists who risk their lives to keep the truth alive. Sometimes words are more powerful than weapons, and dictators are afraid of truth. It also means standing with the brave people of Ukraine, fighting for their freedom against an imperialist war machine. Sometimes I hear that, look, it's their war. No, it is our common war for freedom. Supporting brave people in Belarus, supporting brave people in Ukraine, it's not charity. It's investment in global peace and security. So, dear friends, the road to freedom might be paved with pain. It might be long and challenging. But it's much easier to walk it when you walk it together. As history shows, tyrannies fall down when no one expected. But we can and we must bring this moment closer, and we must be prepared for that. I don't know how our fight for free and democratic Belarus will last, but I do know this: when democracy wins in one place, it inspires changes everywhere. So I do believe that together we can win this global fight for freedom. Thank you. Long live Belarus. Long live freedom.